We're good? Yep. Okay. Well, I appreciate you joining us. This is the fifth in the series of webinars that we have put together this year for the System of Support, and it's our final one. They are being uploaded if you've not been to it yet. At the end of this webinar, I'll show you where to go, so if you want to go back and you have partners or folks you want to share the webinars with, you can actually go back and share them. I'll show you where they're being posted and uploaded. But this morning's webinar, those of you that have me presenting know that I keep them fairly short and hopefully another 25, 30-minute webinar and not use up all of your morning. So we'll go ahead and get started. We are talking about contracts and budgets this morning. Of course, very timely, as those of you probably have been working on your contracts and budgets, preparing to do so before the end of the school year, I hope. So we'll go ahead and get started. Some of this beginning pieces is just some introduction stuff. Creating linkages and embedding Western Pre-K into community programs. It is critical. We know that. We do know our system is set up to use community resources. We know that it's about maximization of resources. You're going to hear a recurring theme throughout the morning of joint decisions, maximization of resources. We will talk a little bit about funding this morning, but when I get to the funding pieces, it will come full circle back to more of a dialogue about resources. So kind of keep that in mind as we do go through. And we do understand that even 10, 12 years ago, as we put this together, there was this idea of shrinking resources. And I know that in light of recent events here, we know that you are dealing with shrinking resources. So public school community-based programs, how do they bring the resources together? It is through these partnerships. The idea of these partnerships, are they an event or are they actually a process? And that's another piece that we're going to be talking about today, is really viewing this as a process. The contracts and budgets is an annual event. I know you all go through, but hopefully you've started thinking about the timeliness of it and the efficiency and the quality of those contracts and budgets. A lot of the contracts and budgets we see, they look nothing the way they did even 2, 3 years ago. They continually evolve as folks deal with changes in their community, changes in funding streams, changes in how they want to raise the quality of their program. So we see a lot of different models of how those contracts and budgets have changed over the last couple of years. One thing that we have to at least be mindful of is the folks wondered after 2012-13 universal pre-K was in effect, how will that impact the county collaborative team, especially the core team? And those of you that were part of the revision and reviewed the revisions of policy know that Section 4 of that policy actually laid out a lot of decisions every year that have to be made by that core team. And these aren't decisions, hopefully, that are made once and forgotten. These are decisions that you're revisiting all the time. And you'll notice highlighted in these next couple of slides that joint decisions. There's a lot of things you have to consider every year, whether it be the location of all the classrooms, including preschool special needs classrooms. The needs may change year to year. Populations may shift of children where services are needed. It is a lot to consider just for the location. Then we get into resources and having there's quite a bit of dialogue that has to take place about how we're going to share information about the classroom. Staffing patterns change. We've seen many counties begin shifting that staffing pattern. Qualifications are raising. We want higher standard teachers and assistant teachers. And some of that dialogue we've seen, we've started to have long conversations about, well, who's going to employ the lead teacher? Who's going to employ the assistant teacher? Just because the way it looks now may not, you may have a plan in your county for 5 years from now. You want to see that shift so you can maximize resources. Facilities, food, transportation, program availability. Some folks are thinking now, how do I expand my program to meet the new 14 hours per week next year? Maybe I'm a county that wants to start moving to a full day. These are all things that really impact that contract, and at the end of the day, it does impact that budget. the universal enrollment process, how you're going to get services to folks. The curriculum is always a concern to make sure that it's part of the contract and budget. We have guidelines for supplemental materials. Not only is there a cost, there's a implementation piece. Is there professional development? School readiness and transitions we're really tackling now. Monitoring and the entire program assessment and continuous quality improvement plan. So as you can see, there are a lot of joint decisions that take place throughout the year that really should all lead up to this huge dialogue around contracts and budgets. And you kind of think, wow, that's a lot to do. Where do we begin? And I think the easiest thing to think about is, let's think about the end. What's our deadlines we're working with on contracts, and work backwards. You're all familiar with the August 1st deadline. August 1st is set, and I've listed the policy pieces here for you. But August 1st, you have a deadline for your comprehensive fiscal report, and you do have a deadline for verification of the contracts and budgets. There's a lot to consider when you work backwards. How much time do I need before that August 1st deadline to have my county board approve and sign off on this, or have a superintendent approve? And if I know that timeline, well, how much time before that does it take for my partners to take it through their boards and have their directors sign off? Before that, how much time does it take for the core team to really put this together, weed through, because that's their recommendation to these partners and the leadership in those partnerships to think about, these are our recommendations for the contract. We see contracts come in as early as February, March, and we do see them late. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening with these late contracts. How long does it really take your county collaborative team to do this? And it comes back to what I said earlier. Are you looking at this as an event and a time period where we just get together, we sign, get through the approval process, or do you look at the contracts and budgets as a process, a ongoing dialogue that takes many, many months to make sure all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted, that we're going to have the highest quality program? It is a joint effort. It is about maximization of resources. It's making sure that all those resources do go in to making sure we meet 25-25. And it is quite frustrating that sometimes we don't start with the dialogue of quality. We don't start with the dialogue of what does it take to really have a high-quality classroom and this classroom to function at the level we want it to. Oftentimes what we see is the conversation immediately jumps and leapfrogs everything and goes directly to money. And money is a part of the contract and budget discussion, but there is just no way to have a high-quality program that you can start with money first. You've got to start with the pieces it takes to have a high-functioning classroom first. So, the contracts themselves, we are concerned about that August 1st deadline. What's actually verified? We are verifying that by the time children start school, there is a signed contract to ensure that classroom is ready, it's supported, there's liability issues to consider. And, is it, let's start with signed. A contract is an agreement by two partners. And sometimes through the universal program reviews, what we see is that there is a contract in place. It was signed by the local Board of Education. It's on file at the board. But the question is, do all the partners have a copy of it? Was a copy of a signed contract sent to a Head Start or child care director? Are both signatures on the contract? So those are things to think about as you send in those verifications to the State Department of Ed that, yes, we've done the process, we're verifying that it's on file. Verification is a little more complex than that. It is making sure that there's both a contract and a budget for every classroom signed by both partners on file at the local Board of Education. And some of those resources that we're going to be using today to talk about this process, I'm going to pull the website over. And we're going right off the Office of Early Learning's website. And it's under Universal Pre-K, County Collaborative Team Resources. And most of what I'm going to be discussing are the third and fourth pieces down through there. West Virginia Pre-K Partnership, collaborating with community partners, and we will be using the budget template. The links are there, and I'll make sure when Janet, we put the recording of the webinar on, we'll also put the PowerPoint so you can have direct access to these pieces. Those are great resources. I mean, the partnership, if you've not seen that document, we're going to use it today. We're going to talk about the budget template that's online. But as you see, I've also included colleagues and peers. And your colleagues and peers across the state are definitely added in as a resource. You have colleagues and peers that everybody does the contracts and budgets differently, whether it be the timeline, what's included, how they do their budget, how they allocate and think about maximization of resources. So you definitely want to tap into your colleagues and peers across the state. We've invited and highlighted some of those programs at leadership institutes. We continue when you call in and ask for technical assistance. The steering team definitely points you in the right direction of some folks you may want to talk to about how they do theirs. And as with everything in West Virginia, there's 55 counties, and there's definitely 55 different ways to do this. There is a lot of local decision-making that has to take place in this process. And it has to take place in the context of the resources you have available, the budgets that you have available, and definitely, how do you put these together to make sure we're meeting Policy 2525. So there is the contract piece, but required with the contract piece is a budget. And we actually provide a budget template that we ask that is signed and is there for every classroom. And that budget template is pretty straightforward. It hasn't changed a lot over the years. You should be able to see it now on the screen. This is it if you've not seen it. This is really about a dialogue. This piece was never intended to say, let me write down what I'm putting down from the county. I'll send it over to the Head Start or Child Care program. You all write down what you're putting in. We'll sign it. There's the total cost for that classroom. This is really part of that ongoing dialogue. And to be done successfully and done right, it has to be done together. It is intended to be a let's think about the resources we're pulling together to create this contract and budget. Let's really think about what we have available, what resources each partner can bring to the table. Let's see where they plug into this. Let's see where the gaps are, what we need to address. And it is for every classroom. Honestly, county, a community partner, I would not be signing a contract until a budget sheet was completed for every classroom. It's just, this is part of the process. This is something that we're asking to be verified that it was done. And you can add, delete. You may have additional things that you would like to include on your budget. That is fine. But this is the basic template that actually matches the documentation in the partnership guidance piece. Equity of services, that's another thing to think about. These are, universal pre-K classrooms. So each one of these budget sheets, you have to think about, do they all reflect equity? Do they all bring our classrooms to a level of quality that we feel good about that the children in our community have access to? And if not, that's what the budget sheet's for. How do we fill in the gaps to make sure all of our classrooms are at a level that we all agree they should be? Just a reminder, this is on page 9. There's actually a discussion guide that goes along with this on page 9. And I'll bring it up for you. This takes you through every category on the budget sheet. It's just some reminders to think about as you're having discussions with your partners and filling in the budget sheet of things to consider, such as the teacher, aide, administration, family services being provided, space, renovations. There's a section for utilities and how to include them and allocate costs. If you have to deal and think about custodial pieces, supplies for the room, Food has been on there. Many people do a separate contract for food and meals. That's completely okay. Transportation, professional development, the ongoing monitoring piece. So it's fairly comprehensive to really think about all those pieces in Policy 2525 that go back to the joint decisions the core team had to make. And then there's also, if you drop down to page 23, there's a sample contract in here, but there's also Appendix C. Appendix C is fairly new. I think it got launched last year in 2012. And Appendix C is a checklist for developing a partnership. And this is actually intended as a little, those cross the T's, dot the I's. Did we talk about this? Did we address these things? And this is a really good piece to have available. It takes you through some general information, some of the partnership services, the fiscal resources, and it just allows you to check off that, yes, we've addressed this, we've finalized it, there's some action steps, or no, we haven't. We've not talked about this. We've not had a meeting. This hasn't come up in our budget discussions. It's three pages long. General administrative, some of the oversight pieces, record keeping's even on here, how you're going to share information. So these are definitely, it's a resource available to you. I would encourage you to use it. Pull it out when your partners together. Even if you're, the pre-K coordinator, Head Start director, child care director, have your own copy of this. As I went through the contracts and budgets, it's at least a place to check off, was it discussed? Funding, a lot of discussion around funding. I'm sure there's a lot of discussion around funding. I know the Head Start Collaboration Office, the offices here at the department, I'm very interested in the cuts here recently that both could impact this year, definitely will impact next year. Just because these cuts are in place, you got to be real careful of saying, well, I got cut, I just need more money. Money is going to be hard to find. It is about maximization of resources, and the money available for pre-K is definitely not meant to supplant any of the existing resources. It's not meant to place any undue burden on any one partner. A core team should be very confident when they sign these contracts and budgets to say, yes, we have thought about everything it takes to put together this pre-K system. We have a joint decision of how we're going to fund it, and we know the resources available to us. We know, working with our Head Start partners and our child care partners, the resources they can bring to the table. We know the resources we have available, whether it be through IDEA funds, if Title I support in any piece, Title II funds, and of course the state aid funding formula. And just as a reminder, Section 19 of Policy 2525 does talk about the funding pieces and the mechanisms in place. You can still visit the 2008 memo on calculating FTEs, because it does matter how much money you're going to generate in state aid based on the number of hours the children attend. It's also included on the partnership document. There's an assistance piece here. Calculating costs and resources are tackled in the policy. Definitely reminding folks that those are public school children once we enter them into the universal pre-K system, so they are calculated in the state aid funding. It is free public education. 19.4A answers a lot of the questions about the child care piece. It is part of the pre-K program, what we can and can't charge parent tuition. We've tackled that in the past. So if any questions on this, we'll tackle a little bit at the end about frequently asked questions. But just as a reminder, if you're looking for the funding pieces in policy, you want to go to Section 19 of the policy. The partnership document does have some sections in there just to remind people about state aid funding, child care subsidy, and parent tuition, Head Start funding. It's included on page 3. You can definitely go to page 3. I'll bring it up here. But some just reminders about some of those pieces. We get a lot of calls about state aid funding. And it's important to remember that state aid funding, there isn't a specific pre-K funding stream for state aid funding. Your local county boards of education get a pre-K through 12 budget. And the Office of Finance, they do not create a state aid funding sheet for 2nd grade, 8th grade, 11th grade. Out of courtesy, they've always provided us at least, and provided to the counties, what the preschool enrollment generated in their pre-K to 12 budget. And that's really important to know. There's not a dedicated actual amount, but there is a guide of what pre-K enrollment generated. And it does help that core team when they're making their case about what's needed to fund this program and what resources are really needed on that contract and budget piece. Subsidy, if you pull up in the partnership, again, it's page 3, and I'll pull it over here for you to view very quickly. You'll be able to come in, you'll be able to see some of the Head Start description of the Head Start funding. It is a direct federal to local agency funding grant. There's a section on subsidy, and yes, they can still claim subsidy during the pre-K hours. There's a section on parent tuition and what needs to be considered, what you can and cannot charge before and after school is fine. And so if you have any questions, again, page 3, and the idea that this core team really is sitting down and figuring out how do we braid these pieces of funding? How do we pull our resources together? It goes right back to the checklist we provided. It goes right back especially to the budget template. That budget template is about braiding funds, not just putting down, I'm providing this, you're providing this, sign off. What are the gaps? How are we going to fill the gaps? How are we going to extend or expand services? Resources versus just actual dollars. And some of the questions we get asked frequently when we handle contracts and budgets from the West Virginia Pre-K steering team or provide technical assistance, they've supplied me with some that we get recurring calls. We've talked a little bit about, can child care partners charge tuition? For the before and after care, yes. For the actual hours of pre-K, no. You know, and how they set that up in the contract, you know, do they only accept children that are willing to go to the before and after care, or if they're on the universal application as we want to get as many kids in this classroom, we'll make sure we're using the slots available. That needs to be considered in the contract of how are you going to enroll those children and how are we going to claim and fund them. We get a lot of questions about dollars versus resource with Head Start partners. How are dollars invested extending or expanding services versus any supplant issues? Sometimes you definitely see some differences in child care contracts versus Head Start contracts. Child care, definitely, you know, the funding available to them, subsidy is minimal. Parent tuition is where they get their funding. They can't charge during those hours, so there is a difference in funding potentially for child care. With Head Start partners, you know, you have a lot of discussion and dialogue about the resources each bring to the table, whether it be facilities, whether it be professional educators, the assistant teachers, services, and a lot of we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years is, especially if you go down to, example, McDowell County, how do we extend those services? How do we better use the dollars available through state aid to potentially hire more professional staff through those dollars and allow the Head Start dollars to extend services? That is absolutely the types of dialogues we're looking for. Teacher credentials, this is another major topic that we hear a lot, especially during the program reviews. I've provided a link to Laura Kaiser's presentation. We know that we are asking for a different credential beginning August 1st with new hirees having a BA degree. Something to think about, how you're going to meet that new need. You know, are we, do we have a 5-year goal? Do we have a strategic plan in our county to address these changes? The teacher credential, though, needs to be on file. A lot of times what we're seeing is a contract signed, we get into October, November, and then we find out that that teacher doesn't have the credential. that's actually, that's a breach of contract. That's actually not a universal pre-K classroom. And it is very concerning. So you want to make sure that the LEA has on file either the teacher credential form 50, or many of you've not hesitated to write me, and I'll send you verification that the process has taken place. You know that it takes several months to go through the process downstairs, but they are able to verify that they're in the middle of it, it's being reviewed, and you can continue with your contract. But most importantly, it's before that contract signed, verify the teacher credentials. Verify you have a staff member that's going to meet that demand in your contract. And the other one we deal with is, yes, there is an August 1st deadline for verification, but there's always that big but. But we're still working on this. But we're waiting for our school board to approve it. We had to renegotiate a piece of the contract. And those things are fine. That happens. What is very concerning is beginning the school year with children without a signed contract. That's the concerning piece. And if you get to the point in October, you've been running a classroom without a contract, the question becomes, who's liable? The parents are enrolled with the understanding they're in universal pre-K, but without a contract, is it really a universal pre-K classroom? Second month headcount comes. You're collecting state aid funding. Without a contract, are you collecting funds on children that should not be counted in universal pre-K? So it's something to really be aware of, that it's starting the school year without a contract should be very concerning to your school board, your partners, leadership, and definitely the State Department. The resources are there. Sometimes this simply falls into a timeline issue. We didn't go back far enough and begin the process, so something to consider. The two resources I'm going to leave you with, though, is definitely the partnership piece, really being concerned about where do I go to find that particular resource. Go to the partnership guidance document. Appendix C, Appendix B, the checklist. Again, I direct a lot of folks to the checklist for developing a partnership agreement. It's a great resource. There is a sample agreement in there, and that's all it is a sample. But your peers and colleagues, they're usually very willing to share how they develop a contract, samples of their contracts, how they, I know that in 2008's Leadership Institute, we had several counties step up and actually share budget templates and the process for developing budget templates. So definitely, those are great resources. Many of you are typing questions on. I'm going to go back and pull some of these questions. If you have questions, you can post them now. We'll take 5-10 minutes to answer questions, and then we'll talk a little bit about what to expect in the coming months and some of the planning pieces to think about for August and September. Okay, let me capture some of these questions that are coming in. First question is, as you're working on contracts for next year, the question is, can a private child care center also house Head Start students, and students still receive Head Start services? Yes. We see that growing annually. I believe we saw about a 2% growth, and I'd have to ask Tracy to correct me, but I definitely think we had a 2% growth in what we consider three-way partnerships. And that's the local Board of Education, the private child care partner, and Head Start. And as long as that child care center agrees, to work with Head Start, meet the performance standards, they're housing a universal pre-K, yes, you can have Head Start children receive services there, because we definitely want to eliminate the transitions children have to go to. We definitely don't want to see a child going to a universal pre-K being put on a bus or transported to another facility just for services. We see that happening more and more, and we definitely encourage if the three partners can get together, and it does take three partners doing the contract and budgets, though. We get a lot of questions, and I'm going to tackle one of them, but it's been an ongoing emails, calls, texts have come to me about the governor's education bill asking for 5-day preschool programs. I definitely encourage you to go in and look at Senate Bill 359. Look at the language. He does mention that, yes, we would love to have, just as our federal Head Start partners have been very advocate in saying, yeah, we would love to have 5-day, full-day, universal pre-K. But if you go in and read the bill, the language still remains that it may be fewer than 5. It's based on family need. 53 out of 55 counties operate a 4-day model. 2 out of the 55 counties operate a 5-day model. I think what you'll see in that bill is more of a push to full day. The 5-day is mentioned in the opening, but the language in the bill still allows the county collaborative teams to make that decision. Just as a reminder, when you do make that decision, please be sure that the contract, that local child care center, they're going to have a contract to do universal pre-K. Tracy's put it on the board. Between the private child care and Head Start also. Some of you are asking about the county pre-K A certification. At this point in time, I have to refer you to Senate Bill 359. You can go in and review that. Questions come up. Well, I'm reading the bill, Clayton, but I don't see pre-K A's mentioned. Actually, what you're going to see is in that bill, they address kindergarten assistant teachers because 18544, our early childhood, our pre-K bill, takes the language from the kindergarten assistant teacher piece. So by changing the kindergarten assistant teacher piece, it automatically changes subsection M of 18544. So that is addressed in 359. You can go in and see the language they presented, and it's similar to the language we've seen over the last 12 to 18 months for an assistant teacher credential, both a temporary and permanent type of authorization as well as an early childhood paraprofessional. There is also on the site, and I will pull it up for you, on the County Collaborative Team resource site, folks are asking about how to blend or can they still use Title I funds. There is a West Virginia Pre-K and Title I collaboration. It's the last link on this site, and it's a piece that the Department of Education's Federal Program Office and the Title I folks put together with the Office of Early Learning and the West Virginia Pre-K steering team on how you can continue to use Title I to support pre-K. You can go to that document. It'll walk you through what's allowable and what's not allowable. Days of week, people were asking contracts and budgets. The 4-day that I said most counties were in, because of the number of days now in policy, 128 or more, we hope that you see more. You need to meet the 128 for both Policy 2525 as well as Head Start. If you're partnering with Head Start, they need all 128 days, so you need to take that into consideration. And in the time frame of a school calendar, we do not see any 3-day models in the state any longer. And definitely with this push to 5 days, or at least encouraging that if you can go to 5 days, that's great, but you're not going to be able to drop down to a 3-day model. We just do not see them across the state. So something to think about as you're considering days. How do you build in time for, out of those 128 days, how do you build in time for family visits and the parent conferences that you do? Those can be in there. Lots of folks are addressing weather issues, especially if you live in the eastern part, northern part of the state. Is there a contingency plan for weather to still be able to get in our instructional days? Many folks are now including those in their contracts. West Virginia Pre-K steering team, you can continue sending questions to us, especially for the technical assistance pieces. So I've put their contacts up. You're familiar with most of the folks here. Be aware that there are continuing questions coming in. I'll try to address at the end. There are spring RESA meetings upcoming. Your RESA special ed directors typically put those together. They are focusing on the core team this spring, and it would be the final piece of the year-long system support. So you should be seeing some information coming around, some agendas being developed for those. Be aware, too, that by the end of the month, the first annual school readiness profiles will be available. They're actually being presented to the Early Childhood Advisory Council today. They've been vetted by both Education Alliance, several state stakeholders here, and hopefully by the time the RESA meetings take place, you'll have those in your hands. You'll be able to be prepared to ask questions, and we'll try to have a representative at those meetings to discuss that. Many of you are planning for next year. We do have a few dates I can provide you now, but part of your RESA meeting will be working with the county teams to really look at the system support for next year. Do we want to continue doing webinars, a series of webinars? The two dates I can give you is August 9th. It's something to mark on your calendar. August 9th will be the New Administrators Orientation. We had a very successful New Administrators Orientation last year. It's a one-day event at the Marshall University Graduate College in Charleston. It's usually from 10 to 2, 10 to 3, so hopefully many can drive in and back. And you can join by electronically if you can't drive in. It is dedicated to new administrators, those with 2 or less years on the job. We consider new. I know that some of you in new positions would rather it be a 3 or 5 year grace period, but we really focus those that are in their first year or two as a core team member. And this is opened up to all new pre-K coordinators, special ed directors, a child care elected representative on the core team, the Head Start representatives that are new on a county team. This is a one-day event crash course on the policy and understanding this partnership process. September 5th and 6th are the dates set aside now. They are booked for the Leadership Institute. It'll be at the Embassy Suites in Charleston. We hope to do a 10 o'clock start time on the 5th and a 2 o'clock end time on the 6th, so you have one night stay for most of you. Those are the dates that we can provide to you. So August 9th and September 5th and 6th.